The story begins with the flickering of a single, lonely light bulb in a room that smelled of old paper and ancient ink. It was a room that felt less like a place for people and more like a box for keeping secrets. In the center of this box sat a boy named Yuji Itadori. He was not sitting comfortably, for thick, fibrous ropes bound his wrists and ankles to a wooden chair. He was asleep, his head lolling forward, his spiky pink hair casting jagged shadows on his face. But as the air in the room shifted, cool and still, his eyes snapped open. Confusion washed over him like a cold wave. He tugged at his bonds, the rough hemp biting into his skin, but they did not yield. He blinked, trying to clear the fog from his mind, and looked around. The walls were alive. They were not painted, nor were they wallpapered in flowers or stripes. Instead, every inch of the room, the walls, the floor, the ceiling, was plastered with paper talismans. Red and white strips of paper covered in frantic, swirling calligraphy, layered over one another like the scales of a great sleeping dragon. They rustled softly, though there was no wind, whispering in a language of seals and barriers that Yuji did not understand. It was a cage, he realized, a cage made of words. "I see you're finally awake," a voice said, cutting through the silence like a silver blade. Yuji jerked his head up. Sitting across from him was a man who looked as if he belonged to a different world entirely. He was tall, dressed in a sleek, high-collared black uniform that seemed to swallow the dim light. His hair was a shock of snow white, defying gravity, but it was his eyes that drew the most attention, or rather, the lack of them. A black blindfold was wrapped tightly around the upper half of his face, obscuring his vision completely. Yet, as he sat there, legs crossed and relaxed, Yuji felt the distinct, unsettling sensation of being watched. Who are you?" Yuji rasped, his throat dry. "Where is this?" The man leaned forward, a playful smile dancing on his lips. "I am Satoru Gojo," he said, his voice light and airy, contrasting sharply with the grim surroundings. "And you, Yuji Itadori, are in a bit of a bind." Gojo paused, tilting his head as if listening to a song only he could hear. "I have a question for you, Yuji. Which one are you right now?" Yuji stared at him, the question floating in the air like a riddle. "Which one?" "Are you the boy?" Gojo asked, his smile widening to reveal teeth that looked sharp in the shadows. "Or are you the curse?" The word curse struck a match in Yuji's mind. Memories, fragmented and violent, rushed back to him. The school at night, the shattering glass, the monster with many limbs, the finger, the terrible dry taste of the object as it slid down his throat. Yuji hesitated, checking the corners of his own mind, feeling the edges of his soul. He felt like himself, but there was something else there too, a heat in his belly, a shadow behind his thoughts, but he was in control. "I'm me. I'm Yuji." Gojo hummed, leaning back in his chair. "Is that so? Can you control it, that thing inside you?" "I think so," Yuji said, though a cold shiver traced his spine. "Wait, what about Fushiguro? Is he okay? There were injuries. He was hurt bad." Gojo waved a hand dismissively. "Megumi is being treated. He's sleeping. He'll be fine. You, on the other hand, you should be worried about yourself, Yuji. The higher-ups in the world of jujutsu sorcery aren't very happy with you." "Why?" Yuji asked. "Because," Gojo dropped his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, You broke a rule that has stood for 1,000 years. You ate a special grade cursed object, and by all rights, you should be dead. The fact that you aren't, well, that scares them." Gojo leaned down, his blindfolded face inches from Yuji's. "Your secret execution has already been set." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Execution, death. Yuji slumped back in the chair, the reality of his situation settling in like lead. How had it come to this? Just yesterday he had been a normal high school student. Just yesterday his biggest worry was the track coach and his grandfather's temper. As Yuji stared at the paper-covered ceiling, his mind drifted back, away from the room of talismans, back to the sunlight of Sendai, where the nightmare began. The day before his life ended, Yuji Itadori was running, but not on a track. The afternoon sun of Sendai City bathed the Sugisawa 3rd High School in a warm golden haze. It was a typical day, filled with the drone of cicadas and the distant shouts of sports teams practicing on the dirt fields. The school was a hum of activity, a sanctuary of mundane life. Yuji stood in the hallway, a phone pressed to his ear, his foot tapping impatiently against the linoleum floor. "Hello? Sugisawa Hospital?" Yuji said into the receiver, his voice loud enough to turn heads. "Yeah, I'm calling about my grandpa, Wasuke Itadori. Is he behaving?" On the other end of the line, the nurse sighed, a sigh of long-suffering patience. "He's fine, Yuji, but he's asking for you again and complaining about the food." "Tell him I'm coming," Yuji said, checking the clock on the wall. It was nearly 4:30 p.m. "I just have to finish up with my club activities. I'll be there before visiting hours end." "Don't rush, Yuji," the nurse said gently. "He's not going anywhere." Yuji hung up the phone and grinned. He grabbed his backpack, slinging it over one shoulder. He was a boy built for motion, hair spiked and pink, eyes bright and full of mischief, and a body that seemed to vibrate with excess energy. They called him the Tiger of West Junior High back in middle school, a nickname he found embarrassing but secretly enjoyed. He didn't belong to the football team or the baseball team or even the track team, despite the constant begging of the coaches. Yuji Itadori belonged to the Occult Research Club. He slid open the door to the clubroom, a small, dusty space tucked away in a quiet corner of the school. It was filled with stacks of old magazines about UFOs, cryptic posters of Bigfoot, and the smell of stale snacks. It was a clubhouse for the forgotten and the curious. Sitting at the small table in the center of the room were his two senpai, Setsuko Sasaki and Takeshi Iguchi. Sasaki was a girl with glasses and a serious expression that hid a love for the dramatic. Iguchi was a boy with a nervous smile and a haircut that looked like it had been done with a bowl. "Yuji!" Sasaki exclaimed, pushing her glasses up her nose. "You're late! The spirits are waiting!" Sorry. Had to call Gramps. So what are we investigating today? The ghost in the girls' bathroom? The alien signals from the cafeteria?" "Nothing so trivial," Sasaki said, her eyes gleaming. She pointed to the center of the table. "Today, we are attempting to communicate with the spirits that haunt the rugby field." On the table sat a homemade spirit board, a piece of paper with yes and no written on it, along with the hiragana alphabet. A 10-yen coin sat in the middle. "The rugby field?" Yuji asked, raising an eyebrow. "You mean where the guys are getting sick?" "Exactly," Iguchi chimed in, leaning forward. "They say they hear strange noises at night, and then boom, they get a fever. It has to be a curse." "Or just a bad flu season," Yuji suggested, placing his finger on the coin. "But sure, let's ask the ghosts." They closed their eyes. The atmosphere in the room shifted, the dust motes dancing in the shafts of afternoon light. "Spirits of the rugby field," Sasaki intoned, her voice dropping an octave. "Are you there?"
The coin moved. It slid slowly, agonizingly toward yes. "Whoa!" Iguchi gasped. "Did you push it, Yuji?" "No way!" Yuji laughed. "Maybe it's the wind." Suddenly, the door to the clubroom burst open with a crash that made them all jump. Standing in the doorway was the student council president, a strict-looking student with a clipboard and a scowl that could curdle milk. Behind him stood two other council members, looking equally unimpressed. "Occult Research Club," the president barked. "This ends now." Sasaki stood up, trying to muster her dignity. "President, we are in the middle of a delicate séance." "You are in the middle of wasting school resources," the president retorted, marching into the room. "I have reviewed your club's activity reports. They are nonsense. Searched for Tsuchinoko, tried to summon a demon using potato chips. This is not a real club." "It is real research," Sasaki argued. "We are investigating the supernatural phenomena of Sugisawa High, specifically the haunting of the rugby field." "The rugby field," the president sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "The rugby players aren't haunted, Sasaki. They have tics." "Tics?" Sasaki blinked. "Yes, tics," the president said, waving his clipboard. "We found a nest of ticks in the tall grass near the goalposts. The strange noises were crickets. The fevers were tick-bite fever. Mystery solved. Science wins again." Yuji suppressed a snort of laughter. Sasaki looked devastated. "Furthermore," the president continued, turning his glare to Yuji, "this club requires a minimum of 3 members to remain active. You only have 2. "Wait a minute," Yuji said, raising his hand. "I'm a member. That makes 3. The president consulted his clipboard, flipping a page with a sharp snap. "Incorrect. According to the school registry, Yuji Itadori is a member of the track and field team." "Huh?" Yuji's jaw dropped. "No, I'm not. I wrote a cult club on the form." "And yet," the president said smugly, "Coach Takagi submitted a form with your name on it last week. And since the track team brings glory to the school and the occult club brings whatever this is, I am inclined to accept his paperwork over yours." "That sneak," Yuji grumbled. "Coach Takagi forged my signature." "If you want to stay in this club," the president turned to leave, "you'll have to sort it out with him. Until then, get out. This room is being repurposed for storage."
The school grounds were buzzing with energy as Yuji marched out to the track field, Sasaki and Iguchi trailing behind him like worried ducklings. Coach Takagi was waiting. He was a man made of muscle and ambition, wearing a tracksuit that strained against his chest. When he saw Yuji, his face lit up with a predatory grin. "Itadori!" Takagi boomed. "Ready to accept your destiny? The Nationals are calling your name." "Coach," Yuji said, crossing his arms, "I can't just forge my signature. I want to be in the occult club." "Why?" Takagi asked, genuinely baffled. "You have a gift, Itadori. You're the fastest, strongest kid in the school. Why waste that talent chasing ghosts?" "Because the occult club lets me leave early," Yuji said simply. "I have to visit my grandpa." Takagi's expression softened for a moment, but his competitive spirit quickly returned. "Fine, let's settle this like men. A challenge." The students on the field stopped their practice. A crowd began to form. Everyone knew about Yuji's strength, the tiger of West Junior High, and everyone knew Coach Takagi didn't like to lose. "If you can beat me," Takagi declared, gesturing to the field, "I'll tear up the application. You can stay in your spook club. But if I win, you run from me until you graduate." "Deal," Yuji said, dropping his bag. "What's the game?" Takagi picked up a heavy metal ball from the ground. "Shot put. Pure power. No tricks."
The crowd murmured. Coach Takagi was a former competitor. His arms were like tree trunks. Takagi stepped into the circle. He spun, his form perfect, a whirlwind of kinetic energy. With a grunt of exertion, he released the shot. It flew through the air, a heavy iron bird, and landed with a thud in the dirt. 14 meters, a student measured, shouting the distance. It was an impressive throw, well beyond the high school record. Takagi smirked, wiping sweat from his brow. "Your turn, kid," Takagi said. Yuji stepped into the circle. He picked up the shot put. It looked small in his hand. He didn't spin. He didn't adopt a stance. He just stood there, weighing the ball, looking like he was about to skip a stone across a pond. "Hey, coach," Yuji asked casually, "can I throw it however I want?" Takagi blinked. Sure, as long as you stay in the circle." "Cool." Yuji pulled his arm back. He wound up like a baseball pitcher. The motion was wrong for a shot put. It should have torn his rotator cuff, but Yuji was not normal. With a sharp exhale, he threw. Boom! The sound of the release was like a cannon shot. The metal ball didn't arc. It flew in a straight line, a blur of gray against the blue sky. It sailed over the 14-meter mark. It sailed over the 20-meter mark. It kept going. 30 meters away, a soccer goal stood at the edge of the field. The shot put slammed into the crossbar, denting the metal and knocking the goal frame backward into the dirt. Silence descended on the field. The students gaped. Coach Takagi's jaw hit his chest. Yuji dusted off his hands. 30 meters, roughly? He asked a stunned student nearby. Yeah, the student squeaked. "Sweet!" Yuji beamed. He picked up his bag and turned to Takagi, who looked like his soul had just left his body. "So I win, right? I'm sticking with the occult club." "Yeah, sure," Takagi whispered. Yuji waved to Sasaki and Iguchi. "See you guys tomorrow. I gotta run." And with that, the Tiger of West Junior High sprinted away, leaving a legend in his wake. But, unknown to Yuji, he had been watched. In the shadow of the school building, a boy with spiky black hair and a dark blue uniform had witnessed the impossible throw. His name was Megumi Fushiguro, and he was not a student of Sugisawa High. He was a Jujutsu sorcerer. Megumi looked at the dented soccer goal, then at the retreating figure of Yuji. He felt a strange energy in the air, a residue, faint but undeniable. "That guy," Megumi muttered to himself. "He did that without any cursed energy? Just raw physical strength? Is he like Maki?" Megumi shook his head. He had a mission. He pulled out his phone and looked at the photo of the object he was sent to retrieve. A wooden box wrapped in ancient cloth. A special grade cursed object. He had tracked its energy signature to this school, specifically to the instrument shed where the thermometers were kept. But when he had checked the shed earlier, the box was gone. "The seal is weakening," Megumi thought, panic tightening his chest. "If I don't find it soon, people are going to die." As Yuji ran past him toward the school gates, Megumi felt a sudden sharp presence. It was the same energy as the object. "Hey, you!" Megumi shouted, chasing after him. But Yuji was too fast. He was already gone, disappearing into the city streets, carrying the seed of a catastrophe in his pocket.
The Sugisawa hospital smelled of antiseptic and wilting lilies. It was a smell Yuji had grown used to over the past few months. He walked down the corridor, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, and pushed open the door to room 305.
His grandfather, Wasuke Itadori, was lying in the bed, looking smaller than Yuji remembered. His skin was like parchment, thin and pale, but his eyes were still fierce, burning with a stubborn fire under his bushy eyebrows. "You're late," Wasuke barked as soon as Yuji entered. "I told you not to come. Go to your club. Go do something with your youth." "Relax, Gramps," Yuji said, unaffected by the shouting. He walked over to the vase on the bedside table and began arranging the flowers he had bought. "I had time. Besides, the club is fine. I saved it today." "I don't need flowers," Wasuke grumbled, turning his head away. "I need you to stop wasting your time on a dying old man." "You're not dying," Yuji lied gently. "You're just resting." Wasuke snorted. He looked at Yuji, his expression softening into something painful and sad. "Yuji," he said, his voice quieter now, "I have to tell you something about your parents." Yuji froze. He kept his back to his grandfather, focusing intently on a stubborn flower stem. "I told you I don't care." "You should know," Wasuke insisted. "Your father and that woman." "I said I don't care." Yuji turned around, forcing a smile. "I'm happy as I am, Gramps. Just you and me, right?" Wasuke stared at him for a long moment. He saw the strength in the boy, the kindness that he tried so hard to hide behind a carefree attitude. Wasuke knew he didn't have much time left. He could feel the cold creeping up his legs, the darkness gathering at the edges of his vision. He sighed, closing his eyes. "Fine, be stubborn." Yuji quipped, "I get it from you." Wasuke opened his eyes one last time. He reached out a trembling hand, and Yuji took it. "Yuji," Wasuke said, his voice raspy but clear, "you're a strong kid." Yuji squeezed his hand. "Yeah? So help people," Wasuke commanded. It wasn't a request, it was an order from a general to his soldier. Use that strength to save others, even if it's just the people closest to you. Save them. Yuji listened, tears pricking the corners of his eyes. "Don't worry about whether they thank you or not. Just save as many as you can, so that when you die, you won't be alone. Don't end up like me." The grip on Yuji's hand tightened, then went slack. The fire in Wasuke's eyes flickered and went out. The rise and fall of his chest stopped. The room was suddenly very quiet. The hum of the hospital machinery seemed deafening. "Gramps?" Yuji whispered. There was no answer. Yuji stood there for a long time, holding the cooling hand of the only family he had ever known. He didn't cry, not yet. He just felt a hollow space open up inside him, a vast, echoing canyon where his grandfather used to be. "Okay," Yuji said to the silence. "I promise." Yuji packed his bag. He filled out the necessary paperwork at the nurse's station with a mechanical efficiency. Name of deceased, Wasuke Itadori. Relation, grandson. He walked out of the hospital into the cool evening air. The sun had set, leaving the sky a bruised purple. He felt heavy, anchored to the earth with grief. "Yuji Itadori." Yuji stopped. Standing in the hospital courtyard, illuminated by the harsh light of a street lamp, was the boy from the track field, Megumi Fushiguro. He wore a high-collared jacket with a swirl button, the uniform of Jujutsu High. I'm Fushiguro from Jujutsu Tech, Megumi said, his voice serious. I'd like to have a word with you, now. Yuji looked at him, exhausted. I'm in mourning right now. Can it wait? No, Megumi said. It can't. That cursed object you possess is very dangerous. I need you to hand it over. Yuji blinked. Cursed object? The wooden box, Megumi clarified, stepping closer. You picked it up at school. It was in the instrument shed. Oh, that thing? Yuji scratched his head. Yeah, I found it, but I don't have it. Megumi froze. What? I don't have it, Yuji repeated. My senpais in the occult club have it. They said they were going to unseal it tonight at the school. The color drained from Megumi's face. His eyes went wide with horror. Unseal it? Tonight? Yeah, Yuji said, confused by the reaction. They said something about checking the contents. Is it bad? It's not just bad, it's lethal. Megumi turned and began to run, his coat flapping behind him. Curses are born from the negative emotions of humans. Regret, shame, hatred, they pool together and form monsters. Curses are like spiders. They're everywhere, but usually leave people alone as long as they don't bother them. But that object is a special grade talisman, a magnet for curses. If they unseal it, they'll die. Yuji stood there, processing the words. Help people, his grandfather had said. Use your strength to save others. Yuji gritted his teeth. He adjusted his backpack and sprinted after Megumi. He was faster. He caught up easily. Where is the school? Megumi demanded as they ran through the dark streets. Sugisawa Third, Yuji shouted. Follow me. You stay back, Megumi warned. You can't see curses. You'll just get in the way. They're my friends, Yuji yelled back, and I promised to save people.
At Sugisawa High, the hallways were pitch black. The silence of the night was heavy, pressing against the windows like a physical weight. In the occult club room, Sasaki and Iguchi were huddled around the wooden box. They had turned off the lights to set the mood, illuminating the table with a single flashlight. This is it, Sasaki whispered, her hands trembling with excitement. The legendary cursed object. The box was wrapped in old yellowed paper, covered in writing that looked like dried blood. Should we really do this? Iguchi asked, his voice wavering. Maybe we should wait for Yuji. Don't be a chicken, Iguchi, Sasaki teased. We need some atmosphere. She reached out and began to peel back the paper. The seal was brittle with age. It flaked away under her fingers. As the last piece of paper fell away, the lid of the box creaked open. Inside lay a finger. It was shriveled, purple and waxy. It had a long, sharp black fingernail. It looked like it had been severed from a corpse centuries ago, yet it pulsed with a sickening warmth. A human finger? Sasaki gasped, leaning in. Is it real? Before Iguchi could answer, the flashlight flickered and died. Total darkness engulfed the room. Hey, Sasaki cried. Iguchi, stop messing around. I'm not doing anything. Iguchi's voice came from the darkness, pitched high with terror. Sasaki, something is here. A wet, slithering sound echoed from the ceiling. It sounded like wet meat dragging across tile. Sasaki? Iguchi whispered. Help me. Sasaki fumbled for her phone, turning on the screen. The pale blue light illuminated Iguchi's face. But it wasn't just Iguchi.
Perched on top of his head was a creature. It was small, bulbous, with too many eyes and a mouth that stretched too wide. It looked like a cross between a toad and a tumor. Its hands were wrapped around Iguchi's face, pulling at his skin. "What time is it?" the curse gurgled, its voice like mud bubbling. Sasaki screamed. Suddenly, the ceiling of the clubroom cracked. A massive, shadowy hand crashed down, grabbing Sasaki and Iguchi. The walls dissolved into a grotesque labyrinth of flesh and eyes. The school was no longer a school. It had become a stomach. Outside the school gate, Megumi and Yuji skidded to a halt. The pressure coming from the building was immense. Yuji felt it in his gut, a nausea, a heaviness that made it hard to breathe. "Stay here," Megumi ordered. "I'm going in." Megumi clasped his hands together, interlocking his fingers in a specific shape. He took a deep breath, focusing his cursed energy. "Divine dogs!" Megumi shouted. From his shadow, 2 wolves erupted. One was white, the other jet black. They were sleek and powerful, with symbols on their foreheads glowing faintly. They growled, baring teeth that could shear through steel. Megumi sprinted toward the building, the dogs flanking him. They leapt up the stairs, moving like liquid shadows. Inside, the curses were swarming. They were grotesque parodies of living things, bloated bodies, extra limbs, faces twisted in eternal screams. "Feast!" Megumi commanded. The divine dogs tore into the curses. The black wolf lunged, its jaws snapping shut around a curse's neck, dissolving it into purple miasma. The white wolf used its claws to slash through a cluster of smaller spirits. But there were too many. The presence of the finger was driving them into a frenzy. Megumi reached the 4th-floor hallway. The air was thick with the stench of rot. At the end of the hall, Megumi saw a massive curse, a towering mound of blubber and eyes, trying to swallow 2 human figures, Sasaki and Iguchi. "Damn it!" Megumi sprinted forward, but another curse burst through the wall and blocked his path. "I won't make it," Megumi thought, his heart hammering. "They're going to be eaten." Yuji, standing outside, looked up at the window. He was afraid. His legs wanted to run away. He thought about his grandfather. Wasuke had died in a bed, grumpy but peaceful. This, being eaten by a monster? This was not a proper death. If I run now, Yuji thought, I'll regret it forever. He clenched his fists. Crash! The window at the end of the hallway shattered inward. Flying through the glass, amidst a shower of shards, was Yuji Itadori. He had scaled the side of the building. He had jumped 4 stories. "Grah!" Yuji roared, slamming his fist into the face of the massive curse holding his friends. The impact was thunderous. The curse reeled back, dropping Sasaki and Iguchi. Yuji landed in a crouch, scooping up his friends in his arms. "Yuji!" Sasaki sobbed, clinging to him. "It's okay," Yuji said, though his legs were shaking. "I got you." Megumi stared, stunned. He fought a curse with bare hands. He jumped 4 stories. This guy is a monster. The divine dogs finished off the blocking curse and rushed to Yuji's side, snarling at the remaining threats. "Fushiguro!" Yuji yelled. "I got them. What now?" "Get them out of here!" Megumi shouted. "I'll handle the curse." "I want to help," Yuji insisted. "These things, I can see them now." "Only because you're near death," Megumi retorted. "Go!" But the curse was not done. It shrieked, its body convulsing. It was drawn to something Yuji was holding. In the confusion, the wooden box had fallen. The finger, Ryomen Sukuna's finger, was tumbling through the air. The curse lunged for it, its mouth opened wide, a cavern of needle teeth ready to consume the source of power. "No!" Megumi yelled. He tried to summon his Shikigami, but he was too slow. Suddenly, the ceiling above them gave way. Another curse, even larger than the first, crashed down. It landed on Megumi. "Gah!" Megumi cried out as he was slammed into the concrete. The impact was brutal. He was thrown through the wall, tumbling out into the open air of the rooftop terrace. "Fushiguro!" Yuji screamed. Megumi lay on the gravel, blood trickling from his forehead. He tried to move his hands to summon Nui, his flying Shikigami, but his body wouldn't respond. His divine dogs dissolved into shadows. He was defenseless. The curse loomed over him, raising a massive club-like arm. Yuji didn't think. He acted. He sprinted onto the roof, launching himself at the curse. He punched it, kicked it, threw his entire body weight against it. But it was like hitting a wall of rubber. His blows, which could dent steel, did nothing. "It's no use," Megumi wheezed. "Only curses can kill curses." The curse swatted Yuji aside like a fly. He tumbled across the roof, the finger slipping from his pocket. The curse saw it. It opened its mouth, ready to swallow the prize. Yuji scrambled to his feet. He saw the finger. He saw the monster. He saw Megumi broken and bleeding. If it eats that, Yuji realized, we're all dead. He lunged. He caught the finger in midair, but the curse was right there, its jaws closing around him. "Idiot!" Megumi screamed. "Don't let it eat it!" Yuji looked at the finger. It was poison. It was death. But it was also power. If I eat this, Yuji thought, his mind crystal clear in the chaos, I can get the cursed energy to fight them. "Don't do it!" Megumi realized what he was planning. Yuji threw the finger into his mouth. He swallowed. Time seemed to stop. The finger slid down Yuji's throat like a jagged stone. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the world tilted. A shock wave of energy exploded from Yuji's body, blasting the curse backward. The air crackled with black and red lightning. The windows of the school blew out. Megumi shielded his eyes, the pressure forcing him to his knees. "No," he whispered. "This is the worst-case scenario. It's a 1 in a million chance, but..." Yuji stood in the center of the rooftop, but it wasn't Yuji anymore. Black markings, tattoos that looked like tribal flames, began to spread across his skin. They curled around his arms, up his neck, and across his face. A second pair of eyes opened beneath his normal ones. The entity raised its hands, inspecting them. It rolled its neck, cracking the bones. "Ah," a voice spoke from Yuji's mouth. It was deeper, richer, vibrating with an ancient, terrifying malice. "Light." The entity ripped off Yuji's shirt, baring his muscular chest, now covered in the black markings. "The light feels best in the flesh," the entity roared, throwing his arms wide. It was pure, unadulterated evil. It was Ryomen Sukuna, the king of curses. The massive curse that had been attacking them shrieked and lunged at Sukuna, sensing a rival. Sukuna didn't even look at it. He simply flicked his wrist. Splat. The curse was obliterated. It didn't just die. It ceased to exist, torn apart by an invisible force so violent it painted the walls with purple ichor. Sukuna laughed. It was a sound that chilled Megumi to the bone. "A cursed spirit's flesh is no fun. Where are the people, the women, the children? They are crawling like maggots. It will be a massacre." Megumi stood up, his legs trembling. He was facing the most dangerous being in history. He prepared to summon his strongest Shikigami. "I have to exorcise him," he thought, "even if it kills me." Sukuna turned his 4 eyes towards the city lights visible through the broken wall. This era, it's wonderful. Suddenly, Sukuna's hand flew up and grabbed his own throat. "What are you doing with my body?" Yuji's voice, the real Yuji's voice, interrupted. Sukuna froze. "What?" "I said," Yuji grunted, his hand fighting against his own face. "Give it back." The black markings began to recede. The second pair of eyes squinted in confusion. "How are you moving? I am Ryomen Sukuna." "And I'm Yuji Itadori," Yuji shouted. He concentrated, pushing the foreign presence down, locking it away in the cage of his soul. Slowly, the tattoos faded. The second pair of eyes closed. Yuji stood there panting, shirtless and confused. He looked at Megumi. "Whoa," Yuji said, rubbing his neck. "Did I get him?" Megumi stared at him. The boy had just suppressed the king of curses. It was impossible. It was a miracle. And it was a problem. Megumi lowered his hands, but he didn't relax his stance. The air was still thick with tension. "Yuji Itadori," Megumi said, "you are no longer just a human. You are a vessel for a special grade curse." Megumi raised his hand, forming a shadow puppet. "Under Jujutsu regulations," Megumi declared, "I must exorcise you here and now." Yuji raised his hands in surrender, confused, but smiling nervously. "Wait, really? Even after I saved everyone?" The moonlight shone down on the ruined rooftop. The boy who ate the curse and the sorcerer who hunted them stood facing each other, their destinies now irrevocably enshrined in the dark history of Jujutsu.